There are times when you'll do a painting that just flows onto the canvas and you kind of can't stop painting it. This is one of them. It's like I can't do anything wrong. Roll the intro. Rustic Winter Woods. It's a Bob Ross classic. Hello, welcome back to the studio. A question that comes up quite often is there a Bob Ross snow scene that anyone can paint? And the answer is yes, and this is it. It's the Bob Ross classic, Rustic Winter Woods. Now, why do I think anybody could paint this? Well, over the last 20 years of teaching Bob Ross classes, I've seen this painting painted and repaired many times. And I'm going to be doing the same throughout my demonstration. You'll see me get into some of my little classic pickles, and importantly, you'll then see me do the repairs and make those changes. So you know what comes next. Comfy chair, notepad at the ready, and let's paint this Bob Ross classic, Rustic Winter Woods. A snow scene that anyone can paint, and I hope you'll paint. So here's my canvas, 16 by 20, and as you see, I already have the horizon line set a little below halfway. Today I'm going to be using these two acrylics, Burnt Umber and Burnt Sienna, to create an underpainting. I'll be using a white plate, a piece of cast sponge and some basic bristle brushes. I'm going to start my underpainting with some Burnt Sienna. I just dab it on my sponge. I've textured the sponge so that it gives me some nice random shapes. And first I want to set out a bit of a horizon line here. I just tap in a basic shape. I know that I need to come across probably just under halfway, so again, this is just for position. In here, I want a bright area. Now, it's just a simple case of texturing the surface, building up a layer of colour. Notice how I let it fade a little to the centre. Now, time to go into the Burnt Umber colour. Again, tap into some and just work around the outside edges first. Take care not to create any hard edges. This should look like overlapping foliage. In the foreground, I create the shape of some little bushes and low shrubs, and building up some low foliage that I'll cover with snow later on. Now, time to add some trees. For this, I've added a little bit of black gesso to my palette. I want this colour to be darker than the other two brown tones. I'll start off by making just a few small marks. At this stage, I'm still just planning things out a little bit. Once I'm happy, I'll start to make these trees look a little bigger and a little stronger. I think these are old pine trees, and they need some nice branches. Nothing too carefully done here, quite loose. I want this to look really kind of almost distant. I'll add a few to this tree too. There's a couple of bad ones on there though. Well, I'll see if I can cover them up later. A few more at the top here, and I think that's about it. But I'm not sure about this one. It's right in the middle of my eye line. Let's fix it. I'm going to use a baby wipe. Even though the paint's dry, a baby wipe seems to be able to remove almost anything, including acrylic paint. A quick touch up with the sponge, and you'd never know there was a tree there once. I want to add a little more detail to these trees. I'll be using this. It's a synthetic liner brush. I don't tend to use bristle brushes much with acrylic paint, especially not those little liner brushes. It tends to, well, make them go a bit hard, and they're tough to clean. I'll add a few more details here to the background as well. Lots of sticks and twigs. And I think I need to do something in here as well. Those bushes aren't quite dark enough. I've added a little bit more black into my brown colours here. I just want to sort of tap them in, give a bit more depth to my painting. You'll see later on how it affects the overall look of the picture when it comes to putting in highlights. This technique is called imprimatura, earth tone underpaintings. Make sure you let your underpainting dry completely before applying oils. The first layer I'm going to apply is this Bob Ross liquid clear oil paint. I've got some in a small airtight container, and I've got an old Bob Ross brush. You can tell it's old because it's got the little orange tip. This is like thin sort of runny honey type consistency, as you see, but it needs to be applied extremely sparingly. I put a few dots and dashes on my painting and then really give it a good scrub. Hang on to your canvas when you do this. The idea of using this is to enable us to apply a glaze of colour over the top of the acrylics. It needs to be very thin though, because we don't want to actually thin the paint. I'll leave a link to a video all about it up in the corner. Now, time to mix up some colours. As you see, a very basic palette today, and the first colour I'm going to mix is alizarin crimson and sap green. This makes a colour I nicknamed Christmas brown. Green for holly leaves, red for berries. It produces a lovely rich warm gingery brown colour. Almost good enough to eat, but I wouldn't do that if I were you. As you see, you can tint it more red or more green. Today I'm going a little more on the red side. Next top tip, don't forget, dry clean that old 1-inch brush. I'll be using that to apply this colour next. I go into the alizarin crimson sap green Christmas brown colour, load my brush well, and this is a transparent brown colour, which means you can scrub it in over the top of the underpainting. It will tint it slightly and it will make it rich and warm, but it won't cover it completely, as you see. Where it goes over the grey background of my canvas, it'll sort of turn a nice sort of tan colour. I want this winter painting to look nice and warm, just like Bob's original. Now, top tip coming up. When you apply transparent colours with liquid clear over a base colour which is fairly pale, you might notice there's a sort of certain reluctance for the paint to spread properly. Let's have a look at the corner of this canvas. You'll notice that there's sort of lots of brush marks here, and they're hard to get rid of. The way I do it is to use my finger and just blend them out. If you've applied too much liquid clear, you'll notice that the little dots of paint puddle up again on the canvas. It's a sure sign you put on a little too much liquid clear. For the next step, I want a nice clean, dry, new 1-inch Bob Ross landscape brush. So one that's in good condition, not too bristly. I've used a little touch of titanium white and a tiny dot of cad yellow. I want sort of a warm yellow tone for this background area. I'll start off making a few small circles and checking my colour. Looks a bit on the bright side and maybe not quite yellow enough. I'll knock off some paint on a paper towel and add a touch more yellow to my colour. Give it a good blend. I think that looks a little softer, not quite so vibrant and white. I let this colour drift out over the top of my trees. It should be opaque, in other words, you shouldn't be able to see through it, but I know if I apply it very sparingly and blend it well, it almost looks like a nice foggy misty colour. There's a touch more yellow going into the centre here. Once again, I let this colour drift out over the top of my trees. This misty effect helps push things back in my painting. I think I'll add a little bit of dappled light between the trees as well. So I finished the background to my painting, and at this stage I'm going to urge you to have a little bit of caution. It's very tempting to want to carry on adding little bits of colour here and there and more blobs of light and things, but you'll overdo it, and instead of having this lovely sort of fresh dappled light effect, you might just end up with lots of yellow fog. So take care, step back a little bit, and remember, we've still got some lovely big trees to go on there as well. Right, time to press on with our painting. I think it's time to add some snow to our painting. Titanium white with a little tiny dash of cadmium yellow again. Not very much paint on my brush here, just a touch. I'm going to use this to plan out the position of my big trees. I'm going to start here in the centre, underneath where I think the bright spot might be. Notice how I use little dipping strokes. I want to create some nice texture here. I want to create the look of fresh fallen snow over vegetation. I hold the brush very, very lightly here, just letting it bump and run and tap. Out to the sides, I let the paint run out almost completely. I'll try and build up a little bit of snow around the base of that old pine tree. Notice how many times I don't reload my brush. I let that little tiny bit of paint do all of this work for me. As I work away from the background into the foreground, so I want my paint to get more and more sort of shadowy and dark. It's very tempting to pile on loads of white paint at this stage, but trust me, we can play with that later on. Now, you may not have realised it, but when I was putting on those background trees, I was actually planning the position of the big trees too. In fact, this one here and one a little further to the right are really just placeholders. I just wanted to mark the position so I knew not to cover them up with dappled light. I may even squeeze one in on the left, but that's to be decided. I've got some black and some more of my Christmas brown colour. I'll stick to using Christmas brown to start with, and a fresh filbert brush. And here you see I paint right through that acrylic tree in the background. As I come down to where I think the ground will meet the tree, I keep it fairly tight and narrow at this stage. Believe you me, this tree will grow, and if you start out too big, well, there's no way back. So I'll grow it probably to maybe a couple of brush widths wide to start with. I'm scrubbing this paint on, and I think this probably needs a little bit more dark, but I'll carry on adding some nice character to it, some lumps and bumps. Notice how I shake my filbert brush. I let the bristles sort of splay apart and let it sort of do its own thing. Be surprised at how natural you can make a tree look if you don't try too hard. I've switched back to my filbert brush, which I had titanium white and yellow on, and well, that's quite bright. You can really see how that really jumps off the canvas. I probably won't go that bright again, not for a little while yet, but up behind the tree I let the paint run out, and in fact I let it pick up a little of the brown colour from that tree trunk. Once again, this is a gradual process. Enjoy it, don't rush it. I'll pull some colour away from the tree over to the right as well, saving a few of those nice dips and shadows. I'll even brighten up this area on the left a little more. It's a case of balance though. Do a little, stand back, then do a little more. I think through here I might have a shadow later on. Now here is another one of those placeholder trees. I sort of didn't finish it properly in the background. And notice how I pull the paint away from where I think the tree trunk is going to land. Again, it's all about planning at this stage. I'll just pull the paint left and right and leave a nice gap through the centre. I switch back to that brown filbert brush. Once again, I'll block this in. I'll do a little time lapse as well. I think this tree needs to be a little bit bigger, about maybe half as wide again. I'll use that little wiggling technique again, some nice lumps and bumps. Time to add a few branches, and if I'm lucky, maybe I can cover up one or two of those rather unpleasant looking branches on my old pine trees. There you go, that one went right through the middle of it. That was lucky, wasn't it? Now take care when you add branches onto these trees. Try and space them apart so that they're not too regular. Give them a nice little curl where they meet the trunk occasionally. Now, I try not to get too much symmetry in my painting, but sometimes it's, well, I do it, there you go, almost by accident. I'll bend this one up out the way and we'll fix that lower branch. My favourite technique is, again, just to use my finger and smudge it out. It'll soon blend into the background colours, and in a moment you would never know it was there. It's one of the beauties of oil painting. Repairs are almost infinite. There. Gone. I'll add a few more branches. Again, I'll try and keep some of that lovely misty bright spots coming through from the background, making small amendments and changes as I go. I'll grow this tree a little larger still. Once again, back to my liner brush. I'm going to be using this to do some nice sticks and twigs. a little bit more fine detail here. Hold the brush handle well back and paint with just the tip of the brush. I want to add a little highlighting to my tree trunks. Take some of my Christmas brown, a touch of cad yellow, maybe even a touch of Indian yellow later, and a little bit of white. And again, I'm using my snowy brush for this. Super light touch. My trees are quite nice and textured. I just want the paint to just stick where it wants and come off where it doesn't need to be. As you see, this requires a delicate touch. Don't press too hard with the brush, but just let it bounce along. And don't be tempted to go back and tidy it all up. In fact, the looser you paint, the better they tend to look. But don't worry if you overdo it with the highlights. Correcting these tree trunks is as simple as can be. Here you see me playing with that very first tree again. And, well, me being me, I just overdid it. Then I start getting my finger in there and start dabbing with that, and of course it starts to look a bit sort of smudgy. So the obvious fix is to go back to the dark brush and just reapply some of the dark texture. It only takes a moment and it's such an easy fix. So you see, my painting is coming along really quickly. In fact, just adding a bit of snow and a couple of big trees and it's already leaps and bounds ahead of the last time, and yet only two small elements. Sometimes you find a painting like this one that really gives you goosebumps as you're doing it. You know you're doing something really lovely. The challenge is to hold on to your sort of nerve while you do it and not to sort of blow it at the last second. Now, it's very tempting to want to put more trees and things into my painting, but I've learnt from experience to work on the two that I've got and then leave it sit for a while. I may even leave it to sit overnight and come back and have another look. Right now, I'm considering whether I add another tree here to the left or whether I just let the eye wander out of the painting. It's a decision I'll make maybe tomorrow. Here's my painting the following day, and you can see in this area I've been playing. I've been experimenting with some colours for shadows. And I've got two sorts here. This one which is made with a little bit of blue and the Christmas brown colour. That gives a sort of grey. And then I've got a little bit of alizarin crimson and some phthalo blue and white. Makes a sort of nice lavender tone. And I think I'm going to go with the lavender tone. The other one gives me a slightly greenish hue and it's not quite what I'm looking for. And as soon as I touch this lavender to my snow, I know I'm on a winner. Some things just fall nicely in a painting. I don't know why, but it just, like a little bit of magic happens. As soon as I start adding in this colour, my painting comes alive. Watch carefully how little I have to apply to get the desired result. A few touches here, a few touches there. Now the tree trunks have become a little sticky and dry. It means I can put my shadow colour right over the edges without fear of a smudge. Sometimes leaving a painting overnight is the best thing you can do. You come back with a fresh pair of eyes and a canvas that wants to play. There's one more detail I want to add to my painting. But my tree trunks need to be sort of tacky, not wet. I think they're just about right. I'll carry on adding some more shadow to the back of these trees. This painting needs to be done in stages. You need to sort of flip-flop between one bit and another. Add some shadow, then add a little more snow. That way you won't sort of paint yourself into a corner with it. Stand back frequently and just enjoy the process. I can't tell you how much fun this painting is to do, and I'm sure I'm going to be painting some more snow scenes like this in future. Here you see, I'm just thinking about where the light will fall. It makes a sort of pathway through the scene. I wanted to sort of merge at the edges with some of my shadow colours. Once again, you see me use my finger just to sort of push things gently together. The canvas has got a nice sort of tacky feel to it right now, and every bit of paint I apply just seems to stick perfectly. This is a really wonderful painting, one that I think just about anybody could paint really well. It gives you a lot of time to play. Top tip. Developing a light path through your painting is such an inviting thing to do. It takes your eye from the foreground to the distance, but keep those side areas a little more shaded and dark. Here's a neat little tip though. I don't want to smudge the side of my tree trunk. I use my palette knife to act as a shield. Just hold it against the edge of the tree and voila! A perfect way of cutting in your paint. I'll do the same trick on this little tree trunk as well. Just another one of those little things you pick up as you start painting. You pick up these little sort of techniques and tricks and tips. I'll come back and reshape those edges a little later if I need to. Now I finally made the decision to add a third tree, and I've squeezed it right onto the side here. Not completely off the edge of the canvas, but very close. I didn't want it to crowd my painting too much, and I'm keeping the highlighting and the shadowing on this much more subdued. It almost wants to be sort of one of the choir, not actually the soprano. Let's add another little twist to our painting. I've got some of that nice snowy colour. I just want to dab it onto the trunk. I want it to look like snow that's been blown against the tree and it's stuck in the lovely texture of the bark. I'll just tap it on and basically leave it alone, but that looks a little on the bright side. I'll try some on this tree. No, that's definitely too white. I'll tone it down. I'll put a little bit of my lavender colour into it. Maybe make it a little bit more bluey. And just work over it again. Once again, stand back frequently from your painting. Adding these final touches of snow really took my painting to a new level. And I encourage you when you're doing your own paintings to stand back and think what you could add to it to really make a great impact. It takes a little thought sometimes, and maybe you should study some other people's work as well, because it will give you an idea of what you can include in your own work. I'll add a few more touches of snow here and there, especially to these areas of my tree where I think the snow would be caught between the trunk and the limb. Again, notice how quick I am. Just quick touches and dabs with the brush and then move on. I'll give it a little smudge now and then. Now this particular area is quite tricky. The tree in the foreground crosses the tree in the background, but there's a bit of a tangle here. So I'm going to do a little trick. I'm going to add some snow to the top of this branch. It'll bring it forward of the tree in the background. But that looks a bit sort of obvious, so I need to extend this snow along the trunk and the tree branch a little further. And there you have it. A quick highlight to separate two areas of a painting. The little snowy area on this tree is really quite blue. Once again, I don't want this tree to be too bold. I'm just going to put a small touch on here and tap it in well. Now, let's stand back and have a good look at my painting. Yes, that's it. There's one feature missing. A little bit of sunlight. And of course, the only thing I could use to paint that with is my finger. I make a small circle with some off-white colour and then just soften it with the tip of my finger. And there you have it. Rustic Winter Woods, a Bob Ross classic that I think anyone can paint. So there you have it. A Bob Ross classic, Rustic Winter Wood, a painting I fell in love with. And I think you will too, because I truly think this is a painting that anybody could paint. Now, in the meantime, if you've enjoyed watching my tutorial, don't forget, you can always click the little like button down below and subscribe to the channel. If you do, don't forget, ring the little bell, because that means when I release a new video, you'll get to find out about it. If you've enjoyed what I've been doing, leave a comment below as well. But in the meantime, here's another lovely video for you to watch. Happy painting, people. A painting I fell in love with, and I know you will too. cat flap moment again. A Bob Ross classic. Cat flap time. Start that one again.